My name is McLean Kendry, and I am a senior concept artist at Extra Games.
Your game finally came out a few weeks ago. Like, talk about this journey of development and how your game is finally out for people to experience. How does that feel?
I think it's great. For me, being a concept artist and so having had a big hand in the creation of all the visuals and stuff, it's been especially exciting for me to see people react to that. The game's visuals is something that people call out again and again as something they enjoy and they like. Our visuals are the way they are. They're bright and colorful, and they kind of support this idea that this ARPG is like one of the most accessible ones on the market. So seeing all that work has been really satisfying for me personally.
Can you guys talk about your creative process and like where you draw inspiration from when you go to work? I mean, McLean, you can obviously speak to art.
Yeah, well, for starters, we looked at the previous Torchlight games, but in a more general sense, I kind of like to just sit down and start drawing and see what bubbles up. I spend a lot of time looking at different photographs. Like you'll see various like ornamental clothes or costumes from like different cultures. You might look at you might keep up with like technology blogs and see what cool devices are coming up. Obviously the futuristic stuff doesn't really apply to Torchlight, but just in general, I'm constantly trying to take in a lot of cool images and ideas just on my own time, just for fun. And so then when I sit down and start drawing, that stuff will be like bubbling in the back of my head, and slowly the relevant references tend to manifest, like just over time. Like I tend to, I might be drawing, I don't know, a goblin, but I'm thinking about more than that. I'm thinking about, oh, well, what do these guys wear? Like, do they use rope? Do they use fur? They wouldn't use metal, right? Because that's maybe too advanced. Did they use stone tools? And so a lot of those sort of thought processes are informed by just all that extracurricular research that I do for fun.
So McLean, like as a senior concept artist, can you kind of give us an idea, because you're supposed to draw art for other people to pull from essentially, or give people an idea of what something's supposed to look like. So is there any time you draw something and you think it looks amazing and you give it to the 3D artist and they make it and you go, oh, well, I guess that's kind of what I had in mind? Do you have any moments like that at all?
Sort of. I mean, so there's just a lot of like iteration and collaboration that happens. Just because I draw something doesn't mean that I get to push it on through the line. There's already a lot of like, I guess you'd call it like peer review for the work that I do. Like, if we're gonna draw a bug monster, then I might draw like 10 or 20 sketches of what the bug monster is gonna look like, and then we're gonna huddle and we're gonna figure out which one of these is the most appropriate for our game. For what reasons. So yeah, then I'll do a piece. I'll clean it up. I'll really tighten up the drawing. And when I hand it off to a 3D artist, my job isn't done. Like I do continue collaborating with them, like through the process. We have a great character artist, Ryan Rouse, and he'll show us what he's working on. He'll get like a little ways into it, and then he'll loop back with us and say, hey, is this on track? What do you think? And so luckily, I never really have the experience of going away and coming back to a finished product like you just described and being like, ooh, no, I don't know about this. I don't ever have that experience just because of the highly collaborative nature of our studio, which is great. And it doesn't necessarily work like that in every studio. Yeah, luckily I've been spared.
Do you have like a genre you prefer? I mean, do you like science fiction over fantasy, or do you lean more toward fantasy? Like, if your personal preference for artwork?
I'm kind of split down the middle, to tell you the truth. I grew up playing a lot of like Final Fantasy, for example, and the whole reason I showed up to this project was because I had put something like 250 hours on Torchlight 2. So I was already a fan. And I think you draw so much fantasy sometimes, though, that like in my spare time, yeah, I'll go a little bit more science fiction. But it's just because it's not because I like it more. It's just because I don't really have the opportunity to draw it when working on Torchlight 3.
So, McLean, what's the biggest misconception about your job in particular? Like for concept artists, like what's the thing people don't understand about it the most?
That we throw away most of the work that we create. We just, it's a lot less expensive for a concept artist to go try out a bunch of ideas and have 9 out of 10 of those ideas fail. It's much more inexpensive for that than for you to get a bunch of ideas all the way through character modeling and animation, and then suddenly decide, oh, we want a bug that looks different, a bug monster that looks different. So that was one of the, one of my earliest lessons in this industry was how much work we toss. What else? Yeah, I don't know. I would say that's the biggest one.
Do you obviously there's a lot of digital art now. People, use Wacom tablets and draw on their PCs, but like some people still do like pen and paper artwork and inking. Do you do any of that stuff? Are you, I'm obviously you probably used to a lot.
I used to. I don't really have as much time for it these days, but I miss it. I used to, and I miss it, but not so much these days.
What advice would you want to give someone who wants to be a concept artist, like really wants to be a concept artist? Because in my opinion, that's where like you get the fun stuff. You get to experiment and just kind of draw whatever you want, or kind of get a vague direction of where you want to go. You get to be very creative in that environment.
Yeah, so my advice would be to look at the portfolios of artists who are already working in the industry. I would say be thinking about your process work. And by that, I mean, think about having a lineup of sketches that you can present to someone and receive feedback at that stage. If your portfolio does not, at least somewhere in there, demonstrate that you have a process where an art director can come in and give you feedback or advice. If your portfolio only shows like scene illustrations of fully finished characters and stuff like that, I mean, I think that could be good for an illustrator, clearly, but for a concept artist, you want the art director to kind of understand where they come in on your process.
What's your greatest challenge at the office? Is it just there's so many hours in a day to draw and you don't have enough time during the day?
I think that's one of the big ones. Drawing is kind of, like so many things, it's labor intensive. You can only move your arm so many times to create a picture in an hour. So, yeah, time's probably the big one. Time, but also like not injuring yourself. Like I know that might sound silly, but there's a lot of like carpal tunnel type injuries that come with art jobs and office jobs in general, I think. It's also, I don't know if I call this a challenge exactly, but also just sort of like getting people like creatively on the same page with you, but also being creatively on the same page with other people. Sort of understanding, for example, like what our creative director wants requires a lot of listening and sort of putting aside your ego and sort of trying to understand where other people are coming from. But yeah, really hours in a day. That's the big one.
What can you you mentioned carpal tunnel, which was leading into my next question. Like, what can artists do? Like, what do you do to avoid that injury? I mean, do you take breaks? I'm an editor, so I'm at my computer 8-10 hours a day, and I have a wrist guard that I have to wear if my wrist starts hurting at certain points.
Yeah, I don't really have any smart advice except that if I ever feel something coming on, I stop. Like I stop on the spot. I do not try to work through it. I think that's probably the safest thing that anyone can do is stop. Don't try to don't try to cheat your way through it. Like the minute you start feeling like that nerve pain in your finger or whatever, you need to stop, you need to chill. You know, for me, like sometimes that's meant like even taking like a day off, which I hate, but better that than like permanently injuring myself, you know?
How do you feel about freelancing concept art, or like companies or people who want like you to do like an example sketch before they pay you or before they hire you? Like, what's your take as an artist on situations like that?
That I don't love it, but it is kind of an industry standard. What you just described is the art test before they'll hire you. I'm familiar with art tests being a thing when a company wants to make a full-time hire. So yeah, I don't love it. In fact, I've got a couple friends right now who are trying to find a gig, and they're dealing with art tests, and I'm seeing all the downsides of that. You know, you do a lot of research, you put a lot of time into this thing, but the truth is that if they've given you an art test, they've probably given a lot of people art tests, and they're not paid, and only one person gets the job. So like, I don't like it, but then again, what can you do? I mean, I would try not to do them myself. I haven't done an art test in a very long time, but you know, who knows what happens when you lose your job and you really are desperate for that next gig.
What advice would you give to somebody in a situation where like they really could use a job, and say it's like a big AAA company is like, oh yeah, just draw this area for us as a test run. Like it's essentially free work, right? At that point.
Well, I don't know that the companies tend to use that they actually tend to use the work. I think most companies actually don't. So there is at least like some level of good faith there, usually, I think. But you know, I guess the other flip side to that is if you're having trouble getting work and you need to make new work for your portfolio, then maybe that's not the worst context to be making new work for your portfolio. You know, because even in the worst case scenario, if you do a really good job on it and the company doesn't take you on, you still get to take that new artwork that you just made. It goes right in your portfolio, and ideally, it looks like some art that demonstrates how you're being like commercially viable, or however you want to say.
What's coming up next for Torchlight 3? What can you tell us if there's anything coming up for Torchlight 3?
Well, I can tell you that there is certainly more content on the way. Like, for example, we've got a Halloween update that's coming out. I think is it today or tomorrow, but pretty soon there's going to be some new armor sets that do like new cool things in the game, and it's going to be like a little bit Halloween themed. I'm pretty sure we've got a holiday update in the works, like a winter holiday update, and you know, hopefully we'll keep our eyes peeled. I hope that there's more to report after that.